我的妈呀！一觉醒来回不去了。
哇！这我操！完了！
前倾覆没，前倾覆没，前倾覆没。呀，别管了，你别管。
The flood that came from the sky and from China. It began not with thunder, but with silence. Then, on the night Typhoon Matmo slammed into China's southwest border, the sky opened, and the mountains of Yunnan unleashed their fury. For days, relentless rain battered Wenshan Prefecture, turning slopes into waterfalls and valleys into roaring rivers. At the heart of it all stood the Thang Hydropower Dam, perched high above the low river, straining under the weight of nature's assault. By September 30th, 2025, engineers made a desperate decision: open the gates or lose the dam. Floodgates thundered to life, releasing millions of cubic meters of water, over 300 mesienus every second, for 3 straight days. What they hoped would save the structure instead became a ticking time bomb for everything downstream. The torrents tore through Wenshan and Hongha, sweeping away homes, bridges, and entire rice terraces. In a matter of hours, villages vanished under waves of brown water. Witnesses described walls of water taller than trucks and faster than anything they'd ever seen. A farmer from Malipu County wrote on social media, "The water came like a monster. We had no time to save anything, only our children." At least 15 people lost their lives. Hundreds went missing. Over 10,000 residents fled their homes. Roads cracked, mountains collapsed, and entire neighborhoods disappeared. Streets in Wenshan City turned into rivers. Cars bobbed like toys. Homes were ripped from their foundations. More than 2,000 rescuers were dispatched with boats and drones, but the mountainous terrain trapped entire communities. Days later, the air still carried the stench of mud and fuel. Officials estimated the losses at 200 million yuan, but the real cost was the grief etched on every survivor's face. And yet, this was only half the story. The unleashed waters didn't stop at the border. They roared into Guangxi and Guizhou, overflowing the Tajiang River and turning Longzhou into an inland sea. On October 8th, the river surged to 122.09 meters, nearly 5 meters above the danger line. For the first time in history, the floodwaters swallowed over 40 communes and swept through thousands of homes. 4,400 hectares of rice and tea vanished beneath the current. Roads crumbled, with 493 landslides cutting off entire districts. National Highway 322, the lifeline between Longzhou and Pingxiang, disappeared under 2 meters of water. Ferries were halted. 153 ships sat idle as thousands of villagers clung to rooftops, waving flashlights in the darkness. Even after the skies cleared, the wounds remained. Local farmers, once proud traders on the border, now stared at empty fields and growing debts. The government called it a natural disaster, but to the people living it, it felt like a catastrophe created by both heaven and man. Experts warn this is just a preview. Without real-time cross-border flood management, each new typhoon could bring another imported disaster, one that neither side can contain. As dawn broke over the muddy waters of the Tajiang, an old villager whispered, "The flood doesn't care about borders, but decisions made upstream decide who suffers downstream." The border that drowned, when Guangxi and Guizhou faced the storm of a century. The night it happened, Longzhou wasn't sleeping. Rain hammered on rooftops like endless gunfire. Thunder rolled through the mountains, and the Zuo River roared with a fury no one had seen in decades. By dawn, the nightmare began. Over 5,000 residents woke up to a different world, one where streets had become rivers and homes were swallowed by muddy water. Electricity was gone, clean water cut off, and desperate families climbed to rooftops, waving flashlights into the darkness. In the low-lying villages outside town, farmers wept as their year's labor vanished in a matter of hours. Thousands of hectares of rice and fruit orchards, their only source of income, disappeared under waves of brown water. The loss? 120 million yuan. But to them, it was everything. Main streets like Jifang Road and People's Avenue turned into violent streams carrying rubbish, mud, and shattered furniture. Buses floated like abandoned boats. Entire neighborhoods were reduced to silence except for the sound of rushing water. But even in chaos, there was courage. More than 1,000 rescuers, soldiers, firefighters, and volunteers plunged into the flood. Rubber boats cut through the current, carrying crying children and exhausted elders to safety. 10 emergency shelters were opened overnight in schools and community halls. Inside, people huddled together, wet and shivering, but alive. The river dike was raised by 3 meters, yet the water kept climbing. Fear lingered in the air. The sound of cracking soil from nearby hills was enough to make hearts race. In Ningming County, 2 small landslides buried local roads, warning that the mountain might soon collapse again. The aftermath was grim. Standing water turned the air thick and foul, mosquitoes multiplied, and doctors warned of a coming dengue fever outbreak. Streets were coated with mud, markets were ruined, and Longzhou's economy, worth hundreds of millions of yuan, was left hanging by a thread. But the storm didn't stop at the Guangxi border. Further east, in Duyun, Guizhou province, known for its emerald tea hills, the scene was equally heartbreaking. The Dulo River, once a symbol of life, became a raging sea that tore through the city center. On October 8, 2025, flood sensors recorded a water level of 145.2 meters, surpassing the alert mark by 1.5 meters. Heavy rain from the remnants of Typhoon Matmo dumped 200 millimeters in just a few days. The usually calm streets, Jiangji, Wanghulu, and Fenglin Road, turned into torrents of brown water filled with debris and uprooted trees. For the first time in decades, Duyun's iconic green hills were shrouded not in mist, but in the gray veil of a flood. 1,500 residents were forced to flee as central neighborhoods sank under a meter of water. Temporary shelters sprang up overnight in Shan Park and Dongshan Park, where volunteers served rice porridge and handed out blankets to the elderly and children. On the outskirts, farmers watched helplessly as hundreds of hectares of rice and tea, the pride of Guizhou, disappeared beneath the flood. The winter tea harvest, once expected to bring prosperity, was gone. This year, one farmer said quietly, "We will drink the tea we can no longer sell." The damage was estimated at 50 million yuan, 7 million USD, and the heartbreak was immeasurable. Even the city's famous Doi Bang scenic area, which once welcomed thousands of visitors, was closed indefinitely. The sound of laughter and tour buses was replaced by the grind of rescue trucks and the murmur of people cleaning up their shattered homes. By October 9th, the Duliu River finally began to recede. But as the sun returned, it revealed a landscape scarred by destruction. Cracked roads, buried cars, and hills trembling on the verge of collapse. For Longzhou and Duyun, this wasn't just a flood. It was a warning from nature, a reminder of how fragile life is when the mountains, rivers, and sky turn against you. And as residents rebuilt their homes from the mud, one truth echoed across the borderlands. When the flood comes, no one stands alone. Nature's wrath over China, a warning from the heavens. From the scorching plains of the north to the trembling mountains of the west, China is under siege by nature itself. Record-breaking heat waves bake entire provinces, melting asphalt and drying rivers that once sustained millions. Crops wither before harvest, while cities choke under burning air. Then, without warning, the earth shakes. Powerful earthquakes rip through Sichuan and Gansu, splitting roads, toppling homes, and swallowing villages whole. Before people can recover, the sky turns dark again. Torrential rains and flash floods follow, drowning everything the drought spared. It's as if the balance of heaven and earth has been broken, and nature is demanding to be heard. Some say it's climate change, others whisper that it's heaven's warning, a divine message that something in this land has gone deeply wrong. Across social media, Chinese citizens share haunting videos, rivers reversing course, skies turning crimson, hailstones falling in summer. "Heaven is speaking," one user wrote, but no one dares to listen. The disasters grow more frequent, more violent, as if the old world is cracking apart to make way for something new. In the chaos of fire, flood, and trembling earth, many are left asking, is this just nature, or is it the beginning of a great reckoning? As China stands battered by floods, scorched by heat, and shaken by quakes, a chilling truth emerges. This is no longer just a season of disasters, but a season of awakening. The land itself seems to be crying out, echoing the pain of a nation stretched to its limits. Villages vanish overnight, rivers overflow their ancient paths, and the skies no longer bring comfort, but fear. Yet beneath the destruction, something stirs, a silent realization that the age of warning has arrived. Perhaps the heavens are not punishing, but reminding those who've forgotten that when greed and arrogance rise too high, even mountains bow and rivers rebel. The storm may calm, but China's reckoning has only begun.